Okay. I want to just put a feeling on the table to start us off today.
Okay.
It's like 4:00 p.m. on a Tuesday. You're drowning, you know.
Mm.
Slack is pinging, emails are overflowing, you are just completely overwhelmed,
Mm-hmm.
and your body is like physically screaming for help, but and I think this is the universal part, you just don't ask for it
No.
because asking for help feels well, it feels like a failure, right? It feels like if you were just a little better, a little more optimized, you wouldn't need anyone.
It's the unspoken rule of modern life, isn't it?
Mm.
That need equals a flaw.
Exactly. We treat needing care like it's a bug in our software. But today, for this deep dive, we're looking at a text that claims we have that completely backward. It's called The Architecture of Care.
Right.
And the reason it just grabbed me is that it doesn't use all those soft, fuzzy words like kindness or warmth. It talks about care like it's an engineering problem.
Yeah, is the whole key.
Yeah.
Yeah, it reframes care from, a moral virtue into a physiological mechanism.
The thesis statement is basically a punch in the gut to my hyper independence. It just says, being cared for is not weakness, it is regulation.
Regulations is a cold word, it's so
Yeah.
mechanical.
Yeah.
But I think that's why it works so well. The author is asking us to look at a human being not as a soul for a second, but as a complex system.
It's like a power grid or a bridge.
Exactly, like
Yeah.
a suspension bridge. And systems have rules, right? They have load-bearing limits.
They sure do.
So think about that bridge. If the structure is too rigid, if it can't sway a little when the wind hits,
Hmm.
what
It
happens?
snaps, it collapses.
It snaps. And this text argues that care is the specific thing that lets the human system soften enough to absorb shock without breaking. It's not a luxury. It's structural integrity.
Which is a huge shift from how we talk about self-care, bath bombs and a glass of wine. This is saying care is, it's hardware. So that's our mission today. We're going to unpack this idea of care as regulation, what actually happens to our nervous system when we get it, why we confuse it with control, and maybe why our obsession with independence is just a symptom of a system breaking down.
It's going to be a fascinating dismantling of some uh, very deep beliefs.
So let's start with the definitions. How does this text actually define being cared for? Because it sounds simple, but I feel like there's a catch.
The definition it gives is responsiveness without demand.
Responsiveness without demand. Okay, let's double click on that without demand part, because that feels like where everything falls apart.
It's the crucial variable. I mean, responsiveness is just someone noticing you and reacting.
Yeah.
But that without demand piece, that changes everything.
Oh, so?
Well, think about it. If I help you, but in exchange, I expect you to be happy or grateful or perform better tomorrow.
Or just pay me back later.
Right. That's a demand. Your nervous system knows it's a transaction. You're still, on the clock.
So I haven't actually rested. I'm just
Yeah.
I'm preparing to repay a debt.
Precisely. And the text gets right into the physiology here. It says that when we're in that transactional state, our nervous system is just stuck in vigilance.
Vigilance, what does that actually look like in the body?
It's a scanner. Just imagine this little radar dish spinning in your head constantly. Am I safe? Did I do enough?
Is the other person happy with me?
Exactly. Is there a threat coming? That scanning costs energy. I mean, it is metabolically expensive.
That's the internal argument the author talks about, right? That constant background static.
Yes. And true care, that responsiveness without demand, that is the signal that tells the scanner it can finally turn off. The text calls it resting from vigilance.
And here's the thing that really hit me. We think we're at our sharpest when we're on edge.
Oh, absolutely. Adrenaline, coffee, deadline mode, we feel alive.
I know I feel most productive when I'm like slightly panicked. We chase that feeling.
But the source argues that's just an illusion. That's survival mode. You're not actually processing complex information. You're just reacting to threats. Real clarity that only comes back when the vigilance drops,
When the scanner turns off.
when it turns off.
It reminds me of this other distinction the text made that I found so surprising. It's about how care actually feels. It says care doesn't feel exciting, it feels relieving.
It's such a profound distinction. We chase excitement, dopamine, validation, a big win. But that is arousal. That's still a form of stress, even if it's good stress.
So care is the opposite.
It's the exhale. It's the dropping of defenses.
Yeah.
If you're looking for care to give you a rush, you're just looking for the wrong thing. Care is the safety that lets you stop rushing.
It's the difference between a roller coaster
And a solid floor.
and a solid floor. Yeah, the roller coaster's fun, but you can't sleep on it.
Perfect analogy.
Uh-huh.
And without that solid floor, we stay in what the text calls the vigilance trap. We mistake that buzzing anxiety for a high performance, but really we're just stuck.
Okay, but I have to play devil's advocate for a second. Because responsiveness without demand sounds wonderful, but isn't there a fine line? I mean, I worry, and I'm sure listeners worry, that if I let someone take care of me, it just becomes controlling,
Or worse, dependency.
right?
That's the number one barrier. We resist care because we think it means losing power. If I need you, you have leverage.
So how does the text handle that?
It's actually incredibly strict. It draws this really hard line. Care is not control. And the way you tell them apart is the agenda.
But doesn't care always have an agenda? Like, I want you to be healthy. That's an agenda.
It is, but look at the timeline. Control tries to manage the outcome. Control says, I will help you fix this problem my way.
And then you'll owe me gratitude.
Right, control requires payment. True care, according to this, just focuses on stabilizing the system, not dictating the result.
Okay, that feels a little abstract. Can you make that more concrete?
Sure. Think of a gardener. You can water a plant. That's care. You're giving it what it needs to stabilize. But you can't, like, reach into the stem and pull it upwards to make it grow faster.
Yeah.
That's control. Control tries to force growth on an unstable system. Care just stabilizes the foundation so growth can happen on its own terms.
I like that. So care is about soil conditions. Control is about pulling on the leaves.
Exactly. And on your fear of dependency, the text has this really counterintuitive take. It says, dependency removes choice. Care preserves it.
See, I struggle with that one. How does receiving care preserve my choice? If I'm relying on you, I feel like I have fewer choices.
Only if you see it as a power struggle. The text uses this analogy of a drowning person. If you throw them a life raft, are they dependent on that raft?
Well, in that moment, yeah.
For survival, sure. But does the raft take away their autonomy? No. The raft doesn't tell them where to swim. The raft just gives them the breath to decide where to swim.
Without the raft, they have zero choices. They just drown.
Right. So the argument is that care restores your capacity to choose. It doesn't make you smaller. It makes you whole enough to actually function.
So by getting care, you actually get the bandwidth to be more independent, not less.
Exactly.
Because you're not spending 100% of your energy just treading water.
You reclaim your capacity.
Okay, I want to pivot to the flip side of this, because if we don't have this, if we don't get that raft, we don't just stop, we adapt. And the profile the text builds of the care-deprived person was, it was a little uncomfortable to read.
You mean the hyper-independent individual?
Yeah, it felt like looking in a mirror. For me, for a lot of people I know.
And you're right, it's not describing a villain, it's describing someone who just learned, probably very early on, that they have to carry everything alone.
The phrase that just jumped out at me was, they equate survival with strength.
Which is the badge of honor in our culture, right? I survived the week, I'm grinding. But this text frames that strength as a symptom. It's a symptom of absence. When the system isn't getting regulated from the outside, it has to manufacture a substitute.
Because you can't run on nothing. So what are the substitutes? What do we use instead of care?
The source identifies three big ones: control, performance, and numbness.
Okay, let's break those down. I feel like performance is a trap for so many people. It is for me.
It's the good student syndrome. If I'm not being cared for just because I exist, well, then I will try to earn my safety by being the best, the highest achiever, the one who never drops a ball.
The logic is, if I perform well enough, nobody can hurt me.
And maybe someone will finally notice me. Or take control. If I can't trust anyone to catch me, then I have to micromanage every single variable so I never fall. It's an exhausting way to live.
And if those fail?
We go to numbness. We just disconnect the check engine light so we don't have to hear it anymore. We just disassociate from the need itself.
And the result of all these substitutes is?
Exhaustion. The text is very clear on this. It's just basic physics. These things, performing, controlling, they're incredibly energy expensive.
Right.
They require this constant, massive input just to keep the status quo. Care, on the other hand, is restorative. It adds energy back. So the hyper-independent person, they look strong, but they're actually a system running on fumes.
It's like driving a car with the check engine light on, but you just turn the radio up really loud. That's the performance, so you don't hear the engine knocking.
That is a perfect analogy.
Mm.
And eventually that car stops, usually on the side of a highway, in the rain.
So if you're all running on fumes, how do we stop? The text splits this into external care and internal care. And I'll be honest, the internal list is so much harder.
Much harder, because it requires you to treat yourself with the same responsiveness you'd want from someone else.
Before we get to the internal stuff, just briefly on the external, the text lists things like being listened to without interruption.
Which sounds so simple.
But think about how rare that is, to just be listened to without someone trying to fix it or inserting their own story.
Just witnessing. That is regulation for the other person. It validates their whole reality.
Another one was being protected from unnecessary harm.
Which implies advocacy. It's not just holding someone's hand, it's standing between them and the thing that's draining them.
Okay, now for the hard part. Internal care, self-regulation. The text gives an example that just stopped me in my tracks. Not overriding exhaustion.
It sounds so basic, doesn't it? But think about it. How often do you override exhaustion just as a matter of discipline? We see pushing through as a virtue.
Oh, every day.
This text views it as a violation of the system.
That's a huge shift. We're taught mind over matter is the goal. If my body's tired, my mind just cracks the whip.
Right. But if you treat yourself like a machine, mind over matter is just running the engine with no oil, you're going to throw a rod.
Yeah.
Internal care means noticing that distress signal, the fatigue, the irritability, and actually responding to it instead of just suppressing it to get one more email out.
There's a beautiful phrase in there, choosing gentleness when force is unnecessary.
That's the actionable takeaway for me. How many times a day do you force yourself to do something? Force yourself awake. Force yourself to focus. The text suggests that force just creates all this internal friction. It wears down the gears.
And care is the lubrication.
Care is the lubrication that prevents that damage.
I love that metaphor, but I have to ask, isn't that just soft? Isn't it indulgence?
And the text anticipates that exact objection. It says explicitly, care is not indulgence. It is maintenance. You don't put oil in your car as a treat. You don't say, oh, the car did a good job today, you can have some oil. You do it because without it, the machine destroys itself.
So we need to stop looking at a nap or setting a boundary as a reward. It's a requirement.
It's the operational baseline.
So if we actually start doing this, if we accept this maintenance, what happens? What's the output? Because the big fear is we just become lazy, you know? We lose our edge.
The text argues the exact opposite. It says that when people are cared for reliably, they develop resilience. They can actually take bigger risks.
Why? How does that work?
Because they know they have a safe place to land. It's the difference between doing gymnastics on concrete versus on a trampoline.
Right.
You'll jump higher on the trampoline because you aren't terrified of the impact. Care reduces the cost of failure.
That makes so much sense. And it mentions that true care creates a flow.
Yes. In a healthy system, care is given, received, and returned. And that addresses the fear of being like a black hole of need.
Right.
Being cared for doesn't mean you stop caring for others. It just means you're no longer depleted while doing so. You're not pouring from an empty cup. You're part of a circulating system.
So it all comes back to that initial idea, infrastructure. We think of care as this luxury item, something you get if you're lucky.
But the text concludes with this really strong assertion. Being cared for is not a luxury. It is infrastructure.
Infrastructure, like roads, bridges, the power grid.
Exactly. Without infrastructure, a city just collapses. You can't build anything. And the text says, without care, systems fracture. But with it, life becomes inhabitable.
Inhabitable. That's such a low bar, but it's also the most important one. It's not about life being perfect. It's about it just being livable.
It's the foundation. It's the baseline that everything else, ambition, creativity, love, gets built on top of. If the foundation is crumbling, you can't really enjoy the house.
So this all means we have to stop looking at our need for help as a flaw.
It's a feature.
Yeah.
It's the maintenance light blinking, telling you what the system needs.
And we need to stop seeing total independence as the ultimate goal. The goal is a functioning, resilient system, and that system requires input.
It requires us to soften without collapsing.
Exactly.
As we wrap this up, I'm just left thinking about that transition from vigilance to clarity. It's such a promise.
It is.
It leaves me with this one last question, something that sort of emerges from the text's logic.
What's that?
If being cared for is what allows us to finally drop our vigilance,
Yeah.
and if so much of our personality, our drive, our hustle, if that's all just a response to being in a high alert state,
Then what?
then who would we be if we were truly cared for? Reliably, deeply. Who would we be when all that noise finally stops?
That is a massive question. How much of you is actually you, and how much is just a response to a lack of infrastructure?
I think that's the question the text really wants us to sit with. Who are we when we're not just surviving?
Something to think about. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.
Take care.